Victory over Korb Jehanef was costly. It was the loss of his own wife, the sacrifice Mannimarco had to make, that allowed him to conquer and salvage the situation of a war defense. And of course, it was a valuable lesson for him that the path of domination was not through singular campaigns, but through the slow buildup of overwhelming power. Mannimarco must do what is necessary, and he had to enter a period of consolidation and fix his gaze on revenge against House Jehanef. But his immediate actions were those of a patient lord building an unassailable foundations. The strength between the two was similar, and Mannimarco had to focus on growing his armies. He was not just raising soldiers for a singular war, but he needed a permanent, terrifying force. He needed to continue to raise his men, to account for the potential strength difference between that of him and his enemies. The levies would swell to great numbers ranking in the 5,000s to the 10,000s. He knew that when he would have to make his move against the Jehanefs, it would have to be an avalanche and not a skirmish. But in the meantime, Mannimarco would press on the weaker lords to the south like in Reinhold, and easily decimate and take control of the areas as he would expand his worm cult. But Mannimarco would not just focus on warfare alone. He had to turn his mind back onto his dynasty. Because even as a lich, what would happen after he is gone? He is not immune to a potential end. He may not fall of old age, but the unknown can happen, and Mannimarco would need to be ready at all times. He could walk into a haunted house, for instance, and get exorcised or berated by demons. There is no folly or chance that could occur. So we must focus on the growth of his heirs. And now we go into Mannimarco's chambers in a conversation with his tutors on his children's progress. My lord, your son shows great aptitude, but he hesitates to make ruthless decisions. Then, I guess this is what we must teach him. Son, come over. A lesson in lucre is more valuable than a lesson in piety. You must be callous. It is the only trait that serves a ruler. And this was but of what many things as he would try and carve into his children, that they must do whatever it takes to survive. And let us not ignore that of his own daughter, the firstborn heir. She, of course, was greatly shaped in his image. And he would find and create beautiful matches between, to allow his reigns to last for generations to come. But of course, those within are the greatest threats that lie, and should not be ignored ever. His household grew, and he hired many specialists, a new court mage to handle arcane affairs, personal bodyguards, a necessary precaution. Mannimarco possessed a keen eye for talent and would identify people with ease over the duration of this play. There was one instance where he found a man of exceptional martial skill and immediately promoted him to his council, strengthening his inner circle with competence over sycophancy. He would build a stable and efficient and loyal power base. But alas, even with the most highest efficiencies, there still lies openings and cracks in the formations. An acolyte would rush in with alarm and would present the scroll to Mannimarco. My lord, there has been a diplomatic incident and your chancellor has bungled very badly. His foreign affairs with the House of Johannes has failed spectacularly. So his incompetence has invited defiance. Through a frustrating and unforeseen complication, the Johannes truce was dissuaded and he could freely declare war at his leisure. This diplomatic blunder would allow the Johannes to freely challenge the King of Worms whenever they so desired, and it would cause Mannimarco to reframe. He could not allow Hel-Ra to maintain too unchecked. He couldn't expand and widen his borders too far, because his buildup would be quickly unraveled with an attack so close to his capital. Mannimarco would crumble the scroll through his fist. He would have to prepare and plot to crush the ongoing threat quickly and much quicker than anticipated. His war machine would have to be ready to swat and entrap this big lion amongst the group. For an eternal being like Mannimarco, a broken truce was an act of profound disrespect. And our diplomat failing this treaty with House Johannes had made Mannimarco furious instead of cautious. And in his mind, the only response to such insolence was annihilation. He would not allow Corps Johannes to pick the time of warfare. Mannimarco would be the one to decide that. And it was time to remind the Northwest that his patience was a matter of strategy and not weakness. Mannimarco would do what is necessary, and now it was necessary to make an example of House Johannes, the Lion Corps. And Mannimarco, with his numbering armies of undead by the thousands, were on the march, augmented by his new Justicars. He would seek to reclaim Hel-Ra and annihilate the Johannes. Corps thinks my diplomatic failures gives him leave to plot. We will not allow his armies to escape. We have defeated them before on the field of battle. Our men are ready. Our hordes are ready, and we will devour their kin. We will not allow any to escape, and we will crush them utterly and completely. But the arrogance, it seemed, was Mannimarco's own arrogance. As his forces drew near, the reality of the campaign became brutally clear. Corps' army was formidable. Mannimarco wasn't the only one who was thinking about battle and warfare. No. Corps with a numerous amount of well-talented and trained knights had learned from the previous battles. He was prepared for the onslaught. He was ready for the numbers advantage. And through that, a direct head-on assault would lead to a battle of attrition that the Lich Lord could not afford. And Mannimarco on the field of battle would have to acknowledge the staggering difference. Because even with his 5,000 men, he was not fully replenished on his levies. He may have had more men, but the quality of his enemies was much more significant. Let them escape. The attrition would be too great. A war on a direct front is a brutal reality against my troops. Mannimarco would have to abandon his primary plan, and he would have to pivot to a siege. As confident as he was, he thought he could win a war of patience against the Johannes, and he surrounded the fortress and prepared to wait and lay siege to the land. But Corps Johannes was no passive defender. He would maneuver his own forces and strike Mannimarco's supply lines and threaten his own territories and force the Lich Lord's hand wavering between offense and defense. Mannimarco would be forced to abandon many sieges in this grand war for the entirety of the Johannes' reign. 1/3 of the way through, Corbs would undo his sieges, and Mannimarco would have to be careful as he would lose many men. He would try to leave some troops behind, but again, this was but a folly tactic. As the lands would be clear and undo, he would be unable to retreat, attacking the defensive force. The game of cat and mouse would end abruptly, and Corb's forces would successfully outmaneuver the Lich Lord and corner his army. There was no more room to run and no room for strategic retreats. And this decisive battle that Mannimarco had first sought and tried to avoid was upon him. And that battle was a disaster utterly. The Johanna forces were united and expertly led. A wall of steel and valor, and Mannimarco's undead horde for all its numbers was decimated. And as he watched his legions crumbled, his arrogance was what led him to this humiliating and total defeat. But in this moment of vulnerability, the Lich Lord renewed himself. To continue to fight was to face annihilation, and to retreat was to suffer but the same. But to survive, he had to do what was necessary. End this war. Fools! I cannot afford, I must limit my losses. A white peace. And the horn of parley was blown and the fighting would stop. Mannimarco's white peace was a stalemate. No lands changing hands, but the defeat, of course, was absolute. And he was so close to wiping out his enemies, but of course he would fail. And in this moment he was humbled yet again, unraveling and faced the blunting reality of his arrogance and his belief that his will and endless numbers could overcome strategy and quality. He was forced to accept a peace that was in truth the surrender of his ambitions, and his frustration was immense. And it was a cold fire that demanded a different kind of fuel and required a new focus back to the traditional roots. Mannimarco would return to his roots of intrigue, but of course the difficulty of murdering Corbs would be very difficult. Alas, there is a method to make this easier, and difficulty is only but just a measure of how hard it is to conquer or complete a necessary scheme. Mannimarco's skills far outweigh the potentials of this plot, and what he would need is the necessary hooks and the necessary leads on others that will make his quest work. And even if Corbs would even host the mightiest of guards to guard and protect him, Mannimarco had an infinite amount of time, and he would just need to wait until the scheme would grow to a place where it would work. The defeat Mannimarco suffered is that but with what forges the will of the truly ambitious. Mannimarco's humiliating defeat on the battlefield was burned away. It burned away his arrogance, leaving behind a man, a high elf, of singularly focused resolve, and he would have his revenge on Corbs Jahanif. This was a masterpiece of cruelty and planning, and he would do whatever it takes to bring his enemies to death through the meticulous deconstruction of his court piece by treacherous piece. And he would lead and do and target two. And his first was the court priest Zamar, a man whose piety was his shield. And Mannimarco's agents, the masters of moral coercion, would engineer a scene of twisted debauchery within the holy man's private chambers, a blasphemous tableau of forbidden rites, and a carnal sin so vile that if discovered within by the other members of the court, Zamar's reputation would sink to the gutter. He was caught in a hook of pure blackmail for the twisted acts of debauchery. And then Corbs, the loyal steward, Corbs' loyal steward Gore. Mannimarco would employ a more personal touch, and through ancient magics he would meddle with the mind of the steward, assaulting him with nightmarish visions and induce a state of creeping madness. Gore's nights were filled with whispers from the walls and spectral faces of his own ancestors begging him to betray his lord, and his sanity would fracture under the relentless pressure, and he would acquiesce to every demand of Mannimarco and become but an obedient husk, an alibi in the overall quest. And of course, the final piece of the plot was not of Mannimarco's own making, but a gift from the Jahanifs themselves. Mannimarco's sentinels, the elite Justicars, would capture a mage named Momu, and through thorough interrogation, we would discover that this lady was sent by Corbs to mark a teleportation point in Mannimarco's own castle. This failure and the subsequent interrogation, of course, that tore her mind apart, would lay bare the depths of Corbs' own part and plots. And this added a sweet spice of personal vengeance to the Mannimarco's cold calculations. The enemy's scheme was effectively neutralized, and the court was compromised from within, and the stage was set for the event. And in the great halls in Cardala, there was a great victory feast, and the atmosphere was confident and celebratory. Corbs would toast his men with the sun at his side, unaware of the worms that were coiled at his feet. Oh, it was a moment. The moment of vulnerability was but picture perfect. And while the court celebrated its triumph, the compromised steward and priest would subtly clear a path, creating a blind spot in the guards' patrols, and allow a single hooded acolyte of Mannimarco to slip through the throngs unnoticed. and the acolyte would reach the designated spot near the center of the hall, he would whisper a final guttural incantation, and the air would tear open beside him with a soundless rip, and a small horde of DREMORA, clad in their ebony-colored jagged armor and burning with rage, would erupt into the hall. None shall escape! The Daedra, single-minded in their purpose, would ignore the panicking crowd. They were but a whirlwind of slaughter, cutting and weaving through corpses' guard as if they were children. And they would fall upon the High Chieftain before he could even hope to mount a resistance. Corbs would fight like a lion, but he was overwhelmed in mere seconds, and he was cut down in a brutal, swift assault. And his death, of course, in his final moments, was witnessed by his traumatized son, whose screams rang amidst the chaos. As the DREMORA's work was complete, the acolyte who summoned them convulsed. A flash of internal arcane energy consumed him from within, and he would explode. A dead vessel that left no trace, no evidence of allegiance. And the Daedra, with their summoner gone, would vanish quickly as they had appeared. And they would leave behind only carnage and a dead chieftain. We will shift back to Mannimarco's throne room. The messenger would deliver the news, and Mannimarco would allow himself but a small private celebration of death, and a rare smile would rise as he would raise a chalice of dark wine in a silent toast. And so the lion is slain, and the House Johanneth is weakened once again. And now it is only a matter of time before I take my rise and reclaim what was rightfully mine, Hell Ra. And I will take it from the boy who would hope to maintain and stay and carry on his father's legacy. Mannimarco had done what was necessary. He would lose a war only to triumph in the end. And now his greatest threat was but a corpse. His gaze would return to the campaign map. His eyes would bypass the Johanneths and settle back once again on Hell Ra, the one place, the original prize that started this entire conflict to begin with. With the Johanneth threat permanently neutered and their house broken, nothing would stand in the way of Mannimarco, and he would take Hell Ra once and for all.